We have Stu Voigt here, and very excited to chat a little bit deeper about kind of early career playing days, some of the Vikings legacy and things like that. So, wanted to start out generally. What initially drew you to football over other sports? I know you did track and field. I know you did baseball and things of that nature. What drew you to football specifically?
Well, I was immediately drawn to football, and the problem was I didn't know, obviously, there's size requirements, and was not a big kid growing up. I had my growth spurt from ninth grade to 10th grade, where I went from like 5'9" to 6 foot, and then 200 pounds. So I always liked playing football. I actually was a kind of a young baseball player, a little bit of a phenom that followed one of the first bonus babies, a guy by the name of Rick Reicher, who played at Wisconsin back when Wisconsin had baseball. And so I had feelers and was drafted by the California Angels and the White Sox. But in those days, a guy that went to college, the interest got less and less as you got older and older. They wanted you to start right after high school. And I never had a feel for that. I always wanted to go to college. I always wanted to go to Wisconsin. They played pretty good baseball. And I followed a former Viking, Dale Hackbart, who played three sports. So I think I'm the last three-sport guy in the Big Ten. But he played three sports, as did a Badger, a Hall of Famer, and All-American Pat Richter, former athletic director, played three sports. So my deal was I wanted to play all three sports, but yet obviously I wanted to have a professional career, but it's never assured that you can want one, but been able to get one, you have to really work hard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. One of the things, just looking back at some of the sports that you did previously and things like that, that stood out was that you get with the Olympics happening and all that stuff. You did shot put and held the record for high school in Wisconsin for 39 years.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. Talk
that was
a little bit about
interesting to talk about one sport, and I, track.
Yeah.
They didn't have baseball in junior high, and so I said, well, there was track. So I'm not really a runner or a jumper. Let's try this. And because I was a baseball catcher with a strong arm, never had lifted weights, I was kind of one of those deals where you picked it up and you go, this is pretty easy. I had the city record, then had the state record, then the national indoor record, and that record for outdoors stood a long time. Guys like Joe Thomas, who was a great football player, and before that, Jim Flanagan. A lot of guys tried to break it, but finally, later, a big guy, about 6'8", 290 pounds in high school, who ended up not being a football player, but primarily a track guy, broke it. But I was proud of that, but interesting, I never thought that would, and had the discus record along that, and never thought that'd go somewhere because I always knew I could play baseball in the summer. So
Yeah.
Getting back to baseball was my first love, then football, and then track. Something to do, and it turned out pretty good. And if you're winning, you enjoy it more.
You get excited about it for sure.
Right.
That's pretty awesome. Looking at your college days and moving into the professional career, how did playing at University of Wisconsin shape you as a football player moving into the pros?
Well, it was interesting. That was an interesting experience. Of course, now you younger guys, football at Wisconsin was always a big deal. They went to Rose Bowls, and I think between the Gophers and the Badgers, they went 59 through 62. Those 4 years were dominated by Wisconsin. Well, I get there, and football all of a sudden falls off the map. Then it becomes the Big Two and the Little Eight. Wisconsin, Minnesota were down, but Ohio State and Michigan took over. So we had losing records all the time. I was I thought, highly touted tailback. Came in first game, started a tailback for the Badgers, and we weren't getting really yards. But I guess the good news was you got toughened up because as soon as I get the ball, seemingly I would be tackled. So that went on for 2 years. My senior year, I was kind of a tweener. Well, do I just concentrate on baseball or go out for football? I've stuck this long with football, so I'll go out, but I want to change positions. So they were using kind of those funky different offenses. I was a tight end, but basically a wing back in slot position. So caught the ball, blocked, didn't have to run too much. And it caught on. I was the leading receiver for the Badgers that year and also the most valuable player, and played in a couple of all-star games, which I thought I stood out. But yet love to say I was 6'2" in my life, but probably never got that high. I think it was 6'1.5" and maybe weighed 220 pounds in college, so that's not really tight end size. So that's, I think, why had some thoughts of maybe it might go a little earlier, but didn't go to the 10th round, which is when you're going to the Vikings after the 1969 season. That's not a sure thing. They were coming off a Super Bowl, so
Yeah.
I was happy just to make the team and play a little bit my first year, then moved eventually into a starting position.
Yeah, that's awesome. Talk about the draft day. Was that something that was you were kind of sitting, waiting, and hoping? Yeah. And talk a little bit about what draft day was like for you.
Well, of course, now it seems so small time. You wait at your house and you go. You had some feelers. Obviously, the Cowboys were big in recruiting and got getting stuff from them even in my junior year in college and different teams. You got letters. You no one came to watch you really. There's some scouts at the different bowl games, the blue-gray game and the north-south game, both in Alabama. And, nobody said much, but I thought did okay. But so then you wait and and it's, I don't know how many rounds that draft was. It had to be like 15, 18 rounds in those days. But you waited finally the 10th round. Jerry Reichow, who was the personnel guy with the Vikings, called, didn't identify himself for 20 seconds. He said, you were drafted. I go like, well, who's Jerry Reichow and who does he work for? And I said, the Vikings. And I said, oh, I never really had ever heard from the Vikings. I think they had, in those days, they had combines where teams would kind of 5 or 6 teams would lump together and scout guys. So it was a surprise. And all he said is, well, we'll send you a bus ticket to Mankato and see you in July. And that was it. I go, okay, sounds good to me. So I was off on a totally new experience. I was a Packer fan growing up, a spoiler alert. But I said, well, Vikings, good team.
Yeah.
Guys will go to a good team, but didn't know how I'd fare. So you get there, and that's where the hard work began.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were a player, being a tight end, you have to balance the blocking and the receiving aspects. Which parts did you enjoy more, or is it you just love the position because you had the ability?
Well, I was still very new in the position. I'd say the position was for the Vikings because we had so many good backs coming out of the backfield. That was kind of the Jerry Burns, and they used to call it the West Coast offense. But before that, the backs, first Bill Brown was an excellent receiver. Dave Osborne, a good receiver, but not But we had guys like Clinton Jones and Oscar Reed catch the ball. So the backs were going to catch a lot of passes. Also, in those days, in the NFL, I think it was where today it's probably pass 30%, run 30% of the time, pass 70%. It was just the opposite back there in 1970. So you had to earn your stripes by blocking. And I think the good news and the bad news was that in practice every day for me, had 6 weeks of preseason training camp, I blocked Carl Eller and Jim Marshall. So you learned on the job, and if you you didn't want to get embarrassed, but also I think that toughened me up, and I was strong enough so I could hold my own. But that was that Purple People defense was at its very height then. I mean, 1970 until about 74, 75, there was no better defense in football. So that always, I kid Carl Eller and Jim Marshall, and I see him, and I said, I was 6'2", now I'm 6 foot half inch. So getting pounded on by those guys every day in practice. And it was totally different practices in those days. It was full pads, a lot of contact. It wasn't going good. You just practice harder. Now today I get a kick, and my joke is, you used to wear helmets. Now they wear helmets on top of their helmets.
Right.
Which is, I'm going like, wow, we were lucky we got a helmet. I mean, I think our offensive line coach, John Michaels, he was the old throwback of 3 yards in a cloud of dust and kind of square helmets and, just tough it out no matter what. The tougher guys usually win. So totally different philosophy today.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were preparing for games and things like that, did you have any pregame rituals that you had to go through? I know there's a lot of players that have that sort of thing. Is there anything that you went through?
I would say you prepare for the game. You prepare all week. You study your game plan. You study the film. It wasn't, I don't think, as complex as it is today, but you try to be prepared because the night before, I was always kind of a nervous type where you might have got 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep. It was like, whoa, you're going against, in those days, the tight end would block guys like Ray Nitschke and Dick Butkus and Mike Lucci and Sam Huff. Wow, you're kind of going, these guys look like grizzled old veterans when you see them, especially Nitschke with missing all his front teeth and stubble beard. And I barely was shaving in those days at 20. I was playing at 21, so it was like, wow, different atmosphere. You better be tough, or at least act tough to meld in with the rest of the guys, because there were our guys especially, but a lot of the guys on the other team, those were some some tough guys that came to play in real physical game.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question, just in terms of coaches and things like that, Bud Grant and any other coaches that you had, any specific sort of advice that you got from your coaches that you took onto the field or into life as you continued on as a into the radio and into your future life as well?
Well, I only had two coaches in college. John Cota, who ended up being the head coach at Mankato State after he got fired by Wisconsin, and he was a good guy. And I stressed, one, go to school. Two, if you're going to play football, give it all you got. But then I guess preeminent is Bud Grant. I mean, his patient common sense to football that was unparalleled. I think he said, when you're on the field or in your classroom, first do your job. Get the work done. Don't, guys who don't make mistakes seem to stick around. Also, there's difference between being injured and being hurt. He kind of, the saying was, you can't make the club in the tub. So take care of your body, take care of your feet. And he has, just common sense things because he was a great player himself and had coached a lot. So you follow that. And I'd also say as good a coach as Bud Grant was, the mentor really was Jerry Burns and John Michaels. They really took me from raw to established player who really, I think by the end and the top of my career, I knew what I was doing. I didn't make mistakes. If you needed a big play, we had big play guys. Believe me, when you have Chuck Foreman, when you have Ahmad Rashad, when you have, you're not the number one option, but work like every player that you may be the guy that makes the difference. So I think that was it. And Bud also rewarded guys that did that with longer careers. I mean, he wanted guys. That's where you see the Tigeloffs and the Ellers and the Marshalls. My gosh, they had 17, 18, 19 years careers because you could count on those guys. I mean, they weren't going to get in trouble off the field or too much trouble. There was trouble, but I think the authorities kind of turned a blind eye sometimes. But it was a great team to play for, a lot of fun, and ended up doing the games and doing Bud's after the game and before game shows on the different radio stations I worked with. He was just a fine guy, and what a place to play. I always said, Minnesota, kind of, but near the end, obviously, I married a girl from Robbinsdale and been up here since 1973 after I got done with graduate school, and couldn't be happier with my career.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Stu, thanks so much for sharing some of the legendary info that you have from growing up and being a wonderful player for the Minnesota Vikings and obviously a Badger as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. And Skol.
Yeah, Skol Vikings. Good interview, guys. Thanks. Hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks.